The sugya on the sugya of koyach koichay. So the Gemara talks about there are cases, for instance, where you throw something that disconnects. Let's say if you throw those big bunches of figs on a fig tree, right? So if you throw something at it that breaks the branch and now it falls down, so it's not falling the weight that's killing the person. Let's say kill someone. The weight that killing the person is the weight of the figs that are holding on to are on the tree, or the dates that are holding on to the tree. Sorry, but but the branch is not allowing it to fall down. But if you breaking the branch, now the weight falls down and hurts someone. So, but it's not. That's definitely not your koyach. It's not your strength. So you want to know if in this case, bouncing off the wall, is that considered your strength halachically or not? So the Maimer Dekahai Gavna Koichayu, Baramina, we ask the question because there's a challenge. Again, logically, everyone agrees that it makes sense it's your strength. But the question is if the Torah considers it that. Baramina, where do we see a question where it might not be a strength? In the case of sanctifying the waters of the paradum of the red heifer. What is the system of the red heifer? So we burnt the red heifer, we threw all the things into the fire into the red heifer, and we turned the red heifer into ash. The Jewish people preserved the ash to use that ash to purify people. In the times of the first, up until Ezra, meaning the beginning of the second temple, we only had, I believe, Ezra, I think, was the second red heifer. So the first Moshe's red heifer lasted over close to 1,000 years, or Ezra was the second. I think Ezra was either the second or the third, but I think Ezra was the second red heifer. And then they had many red heifers in the second temple, and with Mashiach we'll have the 10th. So what is the situation? You gather all the ash, and then you have to find Maim Chaim, you have to find live water, and that's the most sanctified water in waters halachically to purify. We know we have mikvah, we have a spring. So the water is used for the paraduma have to be Maim Chaim, and it can't go through a vessel. It has a whole system how it trickles, and then you put the ash on top of the water. That's called Mekadesh. That's called sanctifying the waters. And then you had a tree, a little branch that had little buds at the end of it, and you dipped it into the water and you sprinkled that water onto the person or article that needed to be purified, because not just people, and they became pure. Even if a drop touches a person, the person's pure. Okay, so here the what happens, but you have to place the ash on the water. The ash can't fall on the water. It must come from the person who's sanctifying the water, must place the ash on the water. So we find like this. For Amina, we ask a question. Mekadesh, someone who sanctifies the water. Again, sanctifying the water means putting the ash that's already prepared in the time of when they burnt the red heifer and they stored it. So a person takes a little bit of the ash. You have to wonder. I mean, in a very unfortunate situation, there was a I don't know if people watched. They had on YouTube the Eichmann story, the story with the Eichmann prosecution here in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael. And so the person that had to, at the end, when he was sentenced to death, so they took him out, they hung him, and then they burnt him. They made a special oven and they cremated him, and then they took his ash and they threw it out in the sea. They didn't want anything to be left of Eichmann. The person who did it was a police officer for the state, but he also was himself a Holocaust survivor. He had a number. And he testifies, he's saying the story, he's crying. He testified that when he was in the Holocaust, one of his jobs was that he would have to shovel the ash of all the dead Jews, the murdered Jews, shovel the ash so the Nazis, he says, shouldn't, God forbid, have to walk on ash. And he says it was a huge mountain of ash. And he said he couldn't believe, he didn't know how many people that ash represented. He didn't understand what it represented. But when he saw how little ash came out of Eichmann, he realized that mountain of ash meant hundreds of thousands of people, because a person doesn't give off a lot of ash. So I don't know how they preserved the ash so long from the paraduma, because the paraduma, even if it's a cow, it wouldn't have that much ash. But either way, the ash survived a long time. So he took the ash, but by mistake, the ash fell on your hand, or outside, or in the side of the keli of the vessel, and then it fell into the receptacle of where the water was. So it doesn't go directly onto the water. It hits your hand and bounces off your hand into the water. What is that considered sanctifying? That you sanctified the water. So the Gemara says, no, puzzle. It's not. It's not good. You can't use that water to purify people. Why? Because it has to be your koach, your strength, putting the ash. But what do we see from here? That if it bounces off your hand or bounces off the bowl, that's not considered koach. So why would it be considered koach, your strength, your force, so to say, when you bounce it off, when you bounce a rock off the wall to kill someone? If in order for it to be considered murder, it has to be by your force. So to over here, if we see that it's not your force when it comes to sanctifying the water, why would it be your force when it comes to murder? So the Gemara says, no, you're not understanding the case. It's not a situation where it ricocheted off your hand. It slowly fell off your hand. So it kind of landed on your hand and kind of just went over into the water. In such a case, that's not considered sanctifying because it's not your koach. In the case of the rock, it bounces off hard enough to kill someone, right? A rock just hitting someone lightly, even if it's a big rock, not too big, won't kill the person, may hurt the person. But if it has to hit with a force, so that's the case. You can't give an example of the case of the sanctification of the water. So Tashma, come and learn. So now we're going to learn another case with the sanctification of the water to see if it is, if we could also learn. There's another case. There's another situation when you now use the water to sanctify something, right? Let's say you have a metal utensil that becomes impure by being in a situation of a dead person. That metal thing has to now become purified. So also, it's harder. Let's say a person is a bigger person, but a needle or something could be small. So let's say you sprinkle the water, but we're not sure if the water bounced off again the wall or it hit directly on the machat on the piece of metal, the needle. Let's say. So if we don't, so then the same question, we say that's not considered that you purified the machat, the needle. So what do we see from here? That if it bounces off, the water bounces off. Now we're talking about not creating holy waters, but using the holy waters. So you're using the holy waters to sanctify the machat, the needle. So here we say, again, the Gemara says, Tashma, come and learn. A machat, you have a needle. Shahayi nesuna al chereb, so sitting on a piece of earthenware. Earthenware, it can't be purified by the water, so the water won't do anything to the earthenware. But he's Allah and you sprinkled the holy waters to sanctify, to purify this needle. Safik ala machet hiza, safik ala cheres hiza, umitza Allah. We're not sure if the water directly hit the needle or did it hit the cheres, the earthenware, and bounce off like a spring off the water. Now the water is not ash. Ash is very light. So here it bounces off the earthenware, and now it hits the machat. So the Gemara says we don't know. Mitzah means it bounces. So the Gemara says has a puzzle. It's not considered a purification. The sprinkling doesn't work, and therefore you have to sprinkle a second time. But again, what do we see from here? That even if it would bounce off the cheres, if it for surely bounce off the cheres, then it wouldn't be a suffix, it wouldn't be a doubt. And now the only question is that we say that it's a doubt, and therefore we say it's not good. But if we knew for sure that it bounced off the earthenware, it would be considered your koch, your force. So what do we see? Bouncing off something is not considered force. So why would it be considered force when it comes to murder? So Rabbi Chanina bar Yehuda mishmei de Rav. Rabbi Chanina, the son of Yehuda, says in the name of Rav that you're not reading the word mitzah, which means bounce off, but matzah, you found it. What's the difference between mitzah and matzah? So Rashi says that it ends up being a triple suffix. One doubt is maybe the waters directly hit the needle. Second option is it could have bounced off the earthenware, and if it would bounce off with force, that would also be good. The third way is that it hits the earthenware and then just trickles down and goes on top of it, but there's no force. Again, it's like the ash just falls off onto the water, and therefore water can do that. Water could just drip and make its way down, and therefore it's not by any force. And therefore, because we don't know if it had any force, but had we known surely that it bounced off the earthenware, then that would also be considered your force, and that would be considered good. So first of all, based on this Gemara, it's actually not just a question. We actually learn the laws of purifying or sanctifying the water. That force off a wall is considered your force. we're going to learn a few other things. I mean, for instance, you guys know these things better than me, but like, what's considered force in a gun, right? Your finger pulling a trigger is not enough force to kill anyone. But a gun is made as such that the gunpowder with a hit that will create a force that will send a bullet off that could kill someone, right? So based on this theory that it has to be your force, right? No, a person should never be considered murdering someone with a gun because it's the bullet's force that kills someone. It's not the person's force. So now we're going to learn that a law that it's a very interesting law that if you cause a force to happen, then that's a force. For instance, if water is being held up, water has enough force to drown someone. It's being held up, but it needs pressure. And you're not creating the pressure, but you're releasing the pressure. Then that's considered koach, your force. I mean, so koach also because this also, for instance, we learned that a bow and arrow, right? Even a bow and arrow, unlike if you took an arrow with your hand, not a spear, an arrow, and try to throw it at someone, it's not going to be as effective. It's not effective, really, right? Maybe it's sharper to cut someone. The bow and arrow, it's the bow and the arrow, the way the bow and arrow is made, that causes the force for the arrow to fly fast and to hurt to perforate someone. So same thing as a bullet, it's the same system, but it's your force that creates so in the wall, the wall doesn't do anything. The question was if that's considered, if bouncing off is considered. So we established that bouncing off is literally your force. Now we're introducing that if you cause force, that's considered your force. So that would include bullets, bows and arrows, and releasing powerful water, etc. So here we come to the case. Itamar Amarav Papa. Papa said, sorry, we're on page 77b3. Itamar we learned. Amarav Papa. Papa taught us. Hi man, if you took a person, the kafste lechavre, you tie down a person, another person. Rashi says you tie them down hands and feet, meaning to say there's no other way. There's no way for the person to release themselves from your tying them down. Okay, so and what do you do to this person? And you reroute a force of water. And so what happens? You reroute a force of water. Let's read it, and cause the gush of water to sweep over him. So the Gemara says, and so Rav Papa says, Gire didehu, it's considered your arrow. What do you mean your arrow? The water has its own force. Water works on its own force, but you caused the routing of the force. So you tie the person, you put him right there, and then let's say you open up a dam on that person. The water comes flying down and drowns the person. He's tied. He can't get out of it, so he's dead. But the force is the force of the water. But you released the force. So the Gemara says that's considered your arrow, umachayiv, and therefore it's considered murder. If you're warned and all that, you get put to death. So the Gemara says, and so Rav Papa says, however, there's a condition to this situation. This has to be where it's a primary force, immediately kills the person. But if it's a secondary force, then it's considered only grama, which is cause. And what would be a secondary force? If it, like Rashi says, if it continues to run, it starts picking up pace. You release it much earlier. You put the person back, and the water has to run against the surface of the floor, and then it drowns the person. Then that's not considered a direct force. It's an indirect force, and it's considered cause of death, not actual death, not actual murder.
So that seems kind of like the situation would be like if you were to shoot a branch and the branch were to fall on someone's head, though, right? Because that's your force causing a force causing, and then further down the line, it's not like the force that you caused, your own force, is killing the person. It's further down the line.
Yeah, if you climb up on a tree, and a person's standing there underneath the tree, and you climb up the tree and you break the branch and let go, that or just break the branch and it falls down, that's for sure murder. Here, you didn't break the branch with your hands.
You
You
shot the branch.
rock and thought you shot a branch. So there, that's not considered that's grama. Whereas the
Right.
case of water is like breaking the branch. You're literally, that's why it says you have to put the person right by the surface, right there, and then you pull up, you
Okay. Okay.
water
Yes,
right
I
onto the
understand.
person. Yeah.
So Rabbi, in a sense of understanding one of the reasons why these types of concepts were even being discussed in this time period, you can imagine the same scenario I was saying. Instead of shooting something, you're climbing a tree and a branch breaks beneath your weight and falls and kills a partner, and your partner's family brings a case against you, or something like that. You know, a friend of yours or a business partner or a random person walking in the woods. Like there's like a direct connection here between the rulings and like, you know, how they would make a decision for that, whether they would consider that a grumma, or if that was like, did the branch hit another branch on the way down? That's all, like, you know, that's totally fine, because these same rules are that we're just defining to determine someone is guilty are also we're defining to determine all the opposite cases where the person's found not guilty.
Yeah, well, again, the Gemara actually goes into the case of the branch. That's the case of going up a ladder or down a ladder. So if it's not the regular way, then it's less of a shogeg because you don't have to be. It's kind of an onus. But in the case of let's say breaking a branch and falling on someone, again, if it's not intentional, then we're talking about a question of gullus. But even gullus, that it has to be from koyach. It has to be means when you go to exile, it has to be that if you did it intentionally, then it would be considered murder. But if it's not considered intentionally murder, then it can't be considered unintentionally to obligate you to go to exile. So not every time someone dies because of you, is that considered exile worthy, let's say. And if you don't have to go to exile in these cases, then your blood is valuable, meaning that if someone of the family comes and takes vengeance, then it's like taking vengeance again, or killing a regular person where you're not allowed to, which means if there's a warning, then the person who kills you, or the person who kills the person who killed by mistake would be put to death. It's considered regular murder. If you kill someone by mistake, where that same mistake intentionally would have been considered murder, let's say, right? You shoot someone by mistake, then you have to, I mean, I'm not going into the details exactly if shooting someone by mistake is considered a proper shogeg, but a proper shogeg, you would go to exile, and if you don't go to exile, someone kills you from the family, that's allowed. I mean, it's allowed, promoted, however you're going to view it. I just want to say, Rashi says that Reb Papa says that's koch rishon, not koch sheni. So because the question is, how do you define koch rishon, koch sheni in water? It's not so simple, because like when we said in the case of the ash or the water, so there's no koch at all. The ash fell in your hand, and then your strength stopped. And then because the way ash will do it, ash is not going to just stick on your hand. So it fell off your hand and fell into the water. That there's no koch there. There's no force. If you sprinkle water on a cheres and it lands on the cheres, and then it just kind of drips down onto the machat, onto the needle, there was no force there. So everyone agrees that's not considered sanctifying the water or purifying the needle. The question over here is, if you take a person and tie him down. So Rav Papa says it has to be koch rishon. What does it mean koch rishon? How do you define koch rishon in water, really? Because if you put someone, let's say, right by an opening of water, and then open the water, and then right away the water gushes on the person, so that's koch rishon. And if you put the person 5 feet away, it's still the water's force that's hitting you. But Rashi seems to believe that's the difference. He says koch rishon kishepina lahem derech l'tzad zeh miyad nafalav. As soon as you reroute the water, it immediately falls on the person that you tie down, and therefore it's your force. Al koch sheni, Rashi says, you move the person away from where the opening of the water is. And the water doesn't immediately, when it leaves this new route, so to say, you open the new route for the water, a love on the person, mikan, only later down, let's say 5 feet or so, is that and it eventually reaches the person and then drowns the person. Then Rashi says that's grama na koiche. So it means to say, the Rashi says that in order for it to be kocha in the case of the water literally has to fall onto the person, as opposed to tying a person down and then opening a dam, and eventually the water makes its way down by you opening the dam, but it makes its way down and then drowns the person. So I'm not sure if the lack of koach, does Rabbi Steinzot say anything? I'm not sure if the lack of koach is the fact that it picks up speed when it's on the water.
There's nothing in here besides from the note that says what the halacha is, which we've already gone over.
39 over here, he says, the victim has been left some distance away from the barrier, and thus the water did not fall upon him as soon as the burst through the breach. Rather, some time lapsed before the water reached him, Rashi. In such a case, the water is no longer considered to be propelled by the perpetrator's primary force when it reaches the victim. Other commentators explain the Gemara distinction differently. The water that was displaced at the very moment of the barrier was breached is considered to be propelled by the primary force of the culprit, even after passage of time, provided the flow was not impeded. Water that was not displaced until later is not regarded as flowing under the primary force. Okay, the Yad Rama disagrees. The Yad Rama says basically that if you pull if you open up a barrier, even if the person's 5 feet down, but as soon as you open the barrier, the water starts and makes its way and drowns you, that's considered the primary force. But if you open a barrier and then water comes, but only because you open the barrier, that's groma. So that's obvious. That's not an initial force. Okay, let's continue the next case. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa says, Zarak tzror l'mayla, a person throws a rock upwards, like you throw it in the sky. You throw a baseball up, right? And it goes right or left. And because it goes right or left, then it falls down, or some way or another it hits someone, but while it moves right or left, v'harga chayiv. That's considered chayiv, warning and all, that's considered murder. Amalei Mar bar Rav Ashi, the Rav Papa, the son of Rav Ashi, said to Rav Papa, my taima, what's the reason? He says, Mishum de Kaichayu. He's saying that's its strength, that it went to the side from your strength and killed the person. So Tizal if it's considered your strength, Tizal li'il, it should continue going upward. Why did it go to the side? Means if the only way it hit this person is because the person was standing to the left or to the right, and therefore the rock went to the right or to the left, or it hit, let's say, upwards also, you could throw it like this and it goes like that towards the right and the left. So why is that considered? Means basically he's asking that if it's your strength, that means your strength, you threw the rock straight up, and it should have continued going up. The fact that it started to go right or left is it started to lose strength. So if it started to lose strength, it's not your strength. Why is it considered your strength? It's your strength. It means if your strength is still involved in the rock at that point, why isn't it continuing to go straight? The reason it's going right or left is because it's losing strength. So why is that considered kocha? So that's what Rav Ashi, the son of Rav Ashi, asked Rav Papa. Like Rashi says that hochal istadin derechni filasa. So Rashi learns that it kills the person who's standing on the floor, not standing upwards. Upwards, I think, would be obviously that the person would be considered murder. If someone's standing to your right and you throw it to your right, you're hitting a person. But if a person's standing to your left on the ground and you throw a rock up and it makes a U shape and ends up to your left and hits the person and kills the person. So Rav Ashi says, why? The son of Rav Ashi says, why is that kochel? The reason it went left is because it lost strength. If it was still going with your strength, it would have continued going straight upwards. It didn't fall straight down. When it came back to the earth, went to the side, right or left. But if, according to our Papa, it were to go up and fall right back down, and at that moment someone's standing there and it kills them, it's pater, according to Rashi. Why? To our Papa, why? Your strength stopped as soon as it started to fall down. So if you throw a rock, according to Rav Papa, straight up, and then you move and someone takes your place, and the ball goes and the rock comes straight down and hits the person, that's not considered koiche. Why? Because your koyach, your force stopped the second it stopped going up, and then it fell back down. It fell back down on the gravity and the force of gravity. So here, then he says that the it's coming back on its own force. So Rav Ashi says, if that, the son of Rav Ashi says, so why if it goes right or left? If you're saying that this going right or left is considered your force, why is it your force? If your force was still there, it would continue going straightward, upwards. So he answers him the opposite. We're turning the page to 78A1. It says, he says, if it was totally your strength only, meaning that, that you're saying that the reason why it's going right and left is because it lost strength, then because it's heavy, it should fall straight down. Why is it going right or left? So Rashi says it's koyach koyach kachashu. It's a light strength. It means when a person, according to Rav Papa, when a person throws a rock up and it goes right or left in a U shape, the fact that it continues to make that U shape is also from your initial throw. Otherwise, it would have fallen straight down, and therefore, if it goes to the right, even though eventually, as it falls down right, it finds its own gravity. But the fact that it moved right or left, it comes from you, and therefore, that's considered your strength. It's a weak strength, but it's a strength, and therefore, Rav Papa says that is considered murder. Ilav koichi, like Rashi says, ilav koichi tizel tachas. Tipul miyad kineged sudden. If you want to say it's totally that his strength finished, so why didn't it fall straight down? It's a weak strength, Rashi says. It's not a strong strength. A little bit of strength, yeshkan, in this situation there is. Rashi learns that the whole U shape is coming from your strength. I don't know how you would do it exactly. I guess because if the fact that it went, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but he says if you throw it a kind of a way that made the rock turn towards the right or left, that little strength of yours that forced the rock to make that move comes from you, and therefore that's considered murder. Okay, let's continue. We're trying to get to the Mishnah. We're not going to get there today. We're trying to get as close as we can. Now we're learning
I
the
was
law.
going to say that I think that's akin to how like a pitcher throws a baseball. They can put a spin on it that causes it to go somewhere that you wouldn't normally expect it. And so you have a lot of different types of pitches. There's a lot of different ways where you can put like a rotational energy into a ball, so that in the air itself, like it moves rather than like having to bounce off of something.
I'm not entirely sure if we're talking about a pitch here. A pitch is like throwing a ball at someone. If you're standing on the mound, and even if the ball comes, you're standing and you're standing, your arm is up here, and it hits down. Let's say it hits the catcher. The catcher is lower than you, right? I don't think that's the case of the ball falling, and that's considered gravity. That's the ball is going with your force all the way to the mitt of you're throwing it in that direction. And if it's a curve, it's a curve. It seems like the case over here is that, because I'm trying to figure out, what I'm a little confused is that even if, let's say, according to our Papa, the reason it veered right or left is because of your strength. Otherwise, it sure fell straight down. But once it stopped veering right, then it falls down from means it has to make a very large U for it to be your strength. Like if it has to be, it's probably the same distance. If let's say it would have to be, I don't know the math, you guys know the math better, but let's say it would have to go as high as far as the person is. Right? So if you're 10 feet away from the person, it would have to go only 5 feet or 10 feet. I'm not sure how you make the calculation. So that it's the same distance, but if it goes just like this and back down, it's at the end, even if it makes a little bit of a right or a left, it's falling straight down. So it's even if it made the initial right based on your strength, but when it falls down, it's falling down from its own strength. But if it were to go a long U, so then it's at no point, it means if at no point it goes straight down, it just makes a very long rainbow.
It's ballistics.
Yeah, right? I
That's
mean,
what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a rainbow shape, rainbow shape would make sense because it never really falls downwards. It just makes a long rainbow shape and it hits the person. So that's koach kachush. That's a weak thing. But I don't think it means that it goes 2 feet right. You throw it up 100 feet hypothetically, and it goes 1 foot to the right and falls down. That's considered koiche. I think it has to constantly be going right, like a rainbow. So otherwise, it means at no point is it falling based on gravity. I would assume that's what he means. If we say it over here, but that's what it makes sense to me. And in the art scroll, it says somewhat to the side. I'm not sure why somewhat. He says, in other words, the stone did not travel directly upwards, thus it fell to the side. I'm not sure if it means, I don't know if that would be accurate. If it just went a little bit, it's everywhere. A kid could do that, right? You throw a ball up and a little bit it goes to the right and falls back down. But at one point it stops, it falls from gravity. But if it were to be a U shape, a rainbow shape, so then it fell like all the way. So it means the further distance it goes to the right, let's say, or to the left, it's moving from your strength. It's a weak strength because it's eventually falling, but it continues to veer left. But if it at any point loses its strength and falls from gravity, I don't know how that would be different than direct if you just threw it up and it fell right back down. It seems from the Yad Ramah, that's where he quotes in the art scroll, that's what it is. It just goes a little bit to the side. But Rashi doesn't seem to say that. Rashi says, it doesn't fall straight down. As it's coming down, it keeps on going to the side. And therefore, it goes far to the side, and therefore the whole rainbow shape is from your strength. A weak strength, but your strength. Okay, let's continue. Now we're going to go into the case of a combined murder, right? Who's the murderer? Right, a few people beat a person up. Who's the murderer? So Tanu Rabbanan, Hiko Aser B'nei Adam Basar Maklois. 10 people hit a person with 10 sticks. Means each one has their own stick. Umeis, and the person dies. It doesn't make a difference if they beat him together or they beat him one after the next. Then in such a case, the rabbis say, Peturim, no one's considered a murderer because there's no one person who killed him. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser disagrees with the rabbis. And he says, if one after the next, the last person is considered the murderer. Why? He's the one who brings the death. It means if one person hits, and the last person hits him and kills him, so that's the force that killed the person. And Rabbi Yochanan says, both of them are using one same verse for their opinion, meaning the rabbis who say that even if they hit him one after the next, it's not considered, we don't consider the last person or any person the murderer. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser says that if it's one after the next, the last person is the murderer. And you have to understand in damages, it doesn't work like that. In damages, clearly, if you sit on a chair and another person sits on a chair, another person sits, the last person to sit on the chair and break it is, I think it's universal. Everyone agrees that that's considered the person responsible to pay for the chair. If people are loading a donkey, right? This is this week's parsha of loading a donkey. Loading a donkey, and the last person puts the last sack on top of the donkey, and the donkey collapses. So that means there's a point where something breaks. So you're never allowed to hit someone, but is the first person who hit the person with the stick is not like the last person who hit the person with the stick. So what are the verses that the same verse that they both use? The verse says in Vayikra, V'ish ki yaka kol nefesh, if a person hits another person, any person, then nefesh adam, a person, the soul of a person, ma'isumas, and then you get put to death if you kill him. So they both learn from that pasuk. How do they learn from the pasuk? So they says, Rabbi Yochanan says that v'ish ki yaka kol nefesh, any soul. Adam, Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan means kol nefesh, you have to hit the whole soul. You have to your force has to kill the person. It can't be a combined force. Adi kol nefesh, the whole soul has to come out of your force. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser says no. Kol nefesh, kol du nefesh. Any part of the soul that you cause to die, you're the killer. So if 9 people strike a person with a stick, and he's living, and you take the stick and give the final hit, and that's the hit that kills the person. So he says, "Kol du nefesh." You're the person. Doesn't make a difference. The soul left because of you, you're the murderer. So now we're going to try to figure out what kind of scenario are we talking about. Amar Rava says, Hakol Moedim, this is interesting law. I don't believe this is, I'm not sure if this is the law in other countries, but this is Torah law. Amar Rava says, Hakol Moedim, everyone agrees. B'hoyrek is a treifa. Who is the person who's killed that with a stick? If the person is a treif is a person who's not going to die, a person who's surely going to die. Treif, when we say something in food, let's say an animal, is treif, it doesn't mean that the animal is sick. It means the animal will not survive. Whatever the ailment is, and for instance, Rashi says, if the brain is exposed or your windpipe, something is perforated that you cannot survive that situation, and then you're considered a treifa. Treifa, by all definitions, means you're dead. You're physically alive, but you're dead. They killed a dead person. So hakol moedim b'harik is a treifa shupater. That in that case doesn't make a difference if you're the first person, the last person. Then you're considered pater. How does Rashi know that? Rashi says that midloi iflig bay, the very fact that they're not saying even if the person is a treifa, he's considered a dead person. And he says, a person who is dying, not a treifa, dying, can be very sick, dying, but not from people, but from heaven, meaning he's sick, or whatever, something that God caused from heaven, not humanly caused, that this person's dying. So everyone agrees that chayiv, that's considered murder, the last person to hit him. When are they arguing? Begaisis b'dei adam, a person who's a goises, a dying person, but not in a way of treif, but was caused by man. Mar midamile the treifa. One person says he's like a treifa. He's no different than a person that has something in their body that's going to kill them. Mar midamile legoisis b'dei shemayim. One compares him to a person that was. What's the difference in a goisis and a treifa? A goisis is, for instance, a person who's terminally ill. That's a goisis. Halachic, and there's a lot of halachas about a goisis. A goisis says things, could gift things that a regular person can't. A goisis is a will, doesn't have to be written. A lot of things that if a person knows they're dying, they don't have time to organize themselves, and the doctor walks in and says you have an hour left. That's a goisis. It means you're terminally ill, God forbid. But like the halacha assumes roiv goisis lemisa. That's an important word. Roiv goises lemisa. Most people that come into a situation of a goises will die. They're assumed to die and they will die. But the catchword is roiv. Most. A treifa is going to die. The difference between a goises and a treifa will die. A person whose body's been brain has been exposed. It's just a question of time until you die. It's not, you can't survive that. It's 100%. The difference between a treifa and a goises is the percentage of death. So if it's a treif, everyone agrees that that's not considered murder. If it's a goises, that it's a terminal illness that's caused by God, not by person, that is considered murder, because there was no force, that there was nothing that caused the person to die. The person's sick, and he's weaker than he was before. Yes, everyone's eventually going to die, right? No one's living forever. So this person's going to die soon. But it wasn't like anyone did anything. But the problem is, what happens if people beat him up and beat the person up, not to be a treifa, but to be a goises? You beat him up to the situation where the person's most probably going to die. Roiv goises lemisa. So then the question is, do we consider the people's previous force or not? Someone has to take responsibility. So if God is doing it, that's not responsibility. So it's only you. You're the only person who did anything. So you killed the person. That's why everyone agrees that if it's from heaven, if it's an illness, that's considered murder. The question is if other people did things to him. Again, most of the Mfarshim say at the end of the day they have a verse, but they want to give a reasoning to the verse. So again, Rava Hakol Ma'idim B'Harik is a treifa. If it's a treifa shupater, that's not considered murder. The person's for sure going to die. Guy says is most probably going to die, most likely going to die, in most cases going to die. If it's b'dei shemayim, there's no force that caused them to die to get to be the situation. It's just an illness, let's say. But so then you're chayiv, you killed him. When are they arguing? Begaisis b'dei adam. Person becomes in a situation of gaisis where he will almost likely die. but it was caused by people. Mar midami leile treifa. One person says that's just like a treifa. Mar midami leile goyis b'dei shemayim. Mar midami leile treifa. My time la midami leile goyis b'dei shemayim. The person who says, why is this person who's beat up by others like a treifa and not like a person who's been sick? Is goyis? He says goyis b'dei shemayim la yisabed b'maisa. No one did anything. It's just the person became sick. Hi, but in the case of people beat him up, it's abd'maisa. There's people who did something. So therefore, it's not just your action that's killing him. According to the person of Yehuda ben Beseira, who says that no, that's considered like a person who's been sick from heaven. My time treifa. This is treifa machati simanim. He goes, you can't compare. A treifa has signs of 100% death. Like Tosfos says, 100% death. And therefore, there's signs. You see clearly the veshet's broken, the brain is exposed. That's not considered, the last hit is not, person's dead already, just that he didn't die yet. The ghost is only going to eventually die, and therefore that's not considered murder. I know this is not a pleasant subject, but this is the laws, how they're discussing it. I mean, unfortunately, as unpleasant as it may be, we're reading about it in the news all the time. You know what happened in Green Bay, was it, where the kid was beat up by a whole bunch of people in the school parking lot, and then you have many cases where there's gangs who beat up a person, and how does the Torah view that? How does the Torah view the responsibility when it's not one person? And unfortunately, we're reading these stories in the news all the time. So here's the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda. Again, no one's saying that God's not going to deal with the person, but the question is if it's considered that the Bezdin has to put the person to death. So Rashi just says that what is goisis b'dei adam? Again, a goisis. How does he translate goisis in English? A dying person. So he's dying, but it's not a sure thing. It says roiv, only most. Okay. I think we're going to start. Let me see if we have one more case. Hold on. Okay, let's just do one more case until Amar Rava. So here he says like this. Tana Kameder of Sheshes. We're in 78A2. The Tana means one of the rabbis learned in front of Rav Sheshes. This is one of the later Amoraim, the times of the Gemara. It says this: "V'ish ki yaka kol nefesh." Again, he quotes the pasuk: "A person who hits any person, nefesh adam." Lahavi amakas chaver. This comes to include a person who hits another person, ve'im by koich lahamis, and there's not enough force to kill the person, and the person dies anyways. Uba'ach, and comes another person. And then he kills him after the first person hit him with less force. It was not enough force to kill him. Shehu chayev, that it comes to say that the second person is obligated. Aim by gedei lahamis. So then what if it's aim de gedamas pshita? If there isn't enough force to kill him, of course he's not considered obligated. He didn't do anything. He didn't do murder. So he says, no, that's not how you have to learn it. You have to learn it. That is, that if a person hits someone with enough force to kill him, but he doesn't die right away, and someone else comes and hits him and he dies, that he's obligated. And who is this go according to? This goes according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says it's the last person that we consider to be the murderer. Okay, then now we're going to stop here, but where we go from here is until the end of the Mishnah. Is we want to know, we learn some interesting laws. We're going to start learning the laws of, back to the question is, what is killing a treifa? If you kill a dead man, means the person is is surely going to die. Is that considered murder? So we already pretty much discussed that it's not considered murder. What happens if you molest a dead man? Is that considered molestation? What happens if a dead man molests? For a dead man, a person who's a treifa kills. Is that what do we do with the person who's the treifa? We have other questions. Is what happens if the witnesses are people that are surely going to die? The problem is that according to Torah, the witnesses cannot be witnesses unless they could be put to death if we find out that they're lying. But you can't kill them because they're already dead, meaning because they're considered a treifa. All these questions get discussed in the next piece of Gemara until the Mishnah. But unfortunately, again, you read these cases and then you read the news, what happened on October 7th, and unfortunately, these are not stories that are just from the imagination of the rabbis. These are stories that unfortunately did happen. Laila Tov, everyone, and Shavua Tov. Take care. Great seeing you guys.